our pastor. Give a big hand to Bishop Howell. To my brother Aubrey and sister Katie, and to the whole family, and to those that have sat in that seat, families that are here that have sat in that seat know better than any of us how they feel. I don't care how much settlement they may be given. You can never fill the hole in their heart that was caused for no reason. That is why they're here. Give those mothers, fathers, and uncles of victims that come with their In the tradition of the black church, we take a text and a subject, and I didn't want to disrespect Bishop. So I went to the book of Isaiah. Today they tell me this is grandma's birthday. I'm a little older than her, so I gotta wear my reading glasses. Book of Isaiah, 59th chapter, 8th and the 9th verse, says, the way of peace, they know not, and there is no judgment in their goings. Therefore is judgment far from us, neither doth justice overtake us. I want to use for a subject, no justice, no peace. 1986, in a section of Brooklyn called Howard Beach, a young man named Michael Griffith was killed because they said that they didn't allow blacks in the neighborhood. Some of us went out and marched. And during the march, one brother yelled, I believe his name was Omar, no justice, no peace. And it became the chant of our movement. Some of us have made it popular, but it started there. But it really started in the Bible. Because Isaiah said that those that practice injustice cannot practice peace. The absence of justice is the absence of peace. And when we say that, we're not talking about violence, because there is a confusion in this country between peace and quiet. Some of us are told to shut up and just be quiet. And you call that peace, but peace is the presence of justice. You can't tell us to shut up and suffer. We must speak up when there is an injustice. I remember as I was riding here and I saw someone, and as I got out the car to meet the family to ride to the church, heard a man say, I've not seen a funeral procession like this since Prince in Minneapolis. I said, well, we came to bury the Prince of Brooklyn City. We come from all over the country because you hurt one of our princes. That's why we're in this temple with purple all over, because it represents royalty. You thought he was just some kid with air freshener. He was a prince. And all of Minneapolis is stuck today to honor the prince If you knew who we were, if you understood that we were divine decisions that God made, if you understood that his mother and father broke the racial barrier lines and raised him in an interracial home that used to be against the law, but they defied the color barriers. A black man and a white woman, and raised children to not hate nobody. And he was a prince of that raising. If you knew who he was. You have been caught with mistaken identity. You keep thinking that we're somebody we're not. They tell our young folks to don't go to the streets and march. When marching and protesting is a way of correcting the injustice Isaiah talked about. You can't go to church on Sunday and read this book that we call the Bible and not fight against oppression. God is not on the side of the oppressor. God is on the side of the oppressed. For every Pharaoh there was a Moses. For every Nebuchadnezzar there was a Daniel. For every Belshazzar there were 3 Hebrew boys. For every Herod there was a Jesus. We come in the tradition of what God's plan was, and when you oppress us, we must stand up. That's why we're here. 11 months ago, we stood for George Floyd. And as the trial wound down and the jury was about to get the verdict, and the reason we got the jury we got and the verdict we got is God used a young brother born and raised as a Muslim, but believing in the same God. Don't matter how you approach God. And elected him even after you tried to scandalize him. The Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. God doesn't use folk without letting you test them. Everybody that God calls, he lets you baptize them in fire. They indicted Martin Luther King. It only got him ready for what he did. Every time you are under attack, you just get ready because God wouldn't test you if he wasn't going to graduate you. And he was being tested and elected so that he was prepared to take the attacks when he stood up for George Floyd and was able for the first time in the history of the state of Minnesota to convict a white policeman for killing a black man. 2 murder convictions and 1 manslaughter conviction. God has turned the page in the state of Minnesota, and we're never going back no more. Yes, some of us have different tactics, but all of us have the same goal. Talk about some of y'all are civil rights, some of y'all are street activists. We all street activists, and we all civil rights. Some of us young, some of us old, but we all the same. They don't discriminate us because of age. And that's why when I talked to Brother Omar and told him that we'd be there for him, whatever he needs, because we see this young man as royalty. When Ben Crump called me the other night and told me that they were winding the trial down, you better come in, I had certain obligations and I had to fulfill them in New York, couldn't get here the way I wanted. I called one of my wealthy black friends. He said, I'll send you my plane. Some of them got on Twitter talking about why I'm on a private plane. Because I'm that kind of guy. When George Floyd was killed, Tyler Perry sent his private plane to bring the Floyd family to Minneapolis. Robert Smith sent a private plane to bring Eric Garner's mother and me into Minneapolis. We ain't in the back of the bus no more. I'd have taken an Apollo rocket if it was available. Every crisis must be answered, though, with real change. Yesterday, the Attorney General Garland announced a study of the practices in Minnesota. And that is going to lead the way it goes, but now we are fighting for a federal law. Why federal law? Because if we keep having to fight state by state, we'll never solve this. The generation before me, they boycotted in Montgomery against the segregation laws in Alabama. And they boycotted the bus company. 1955, they started December 1st. And for a solid year, they wouldn't ride the bus. They said it was better to walk in dignity than to ride in shame. And they broke the backs of Alabama segregation. But Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy and Rosa Parks said, we can't stop there. We gotta have federal law. And they went their way. Then some young students, the young folk of that day, they became freedom riders, and others did other things. And it took 9 years, and they got the Civil Rights Act federally that made it against federal law, Congresswoman Omar, to discriminate. Well, we've gone from all of these abuses, from Oscar Grant and Amadou Diallo and others, all the way to Philando Castile right here in Minneapolis area. We struggled through all of that, but we are going to now, in his name, in the name of Dante, we're going to pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act as federal law. We are going to make it against the law all over this country to keep bringing us to funerals for our young princes. This is not a Republican or Democratic thing. Isaiah said it's about justice. If you believe in justice, it's time for the federal government to reflect the will of the people. You couldn't have a better picture than to have two people that crossed the color line and raised children to be somebody, to stand up and embrace them. You couldn't have had a better example than the Floyd family that wiped tears from their eyes and stood up with dignity, even as they watched them smear their brother, their uncle, their father. We've always had to take the smearing, Keith Ellison, but behind every dark night, the sun will shine. I was talking to one of the relatives, and I said, well, what are they trying to justify? They said, one said, well, they said they saw some air fresheners in the back of his car. Well, air fresheners is to keep the bad odors out. Well, we come today as the air fresheners for Minnesota. We're trying to get the stench of police brutality out of the atmosphere. We're trying to get the stench of racism out of the atmosphere. We're trying to get the stench of racial profiling out of the atmosphere. We come to Minnesota as air fresheners because your air is too odorous for us to breathe. We can't breathe in your stinking air no more. I know we got to get to the cemetery, but let me tell you this. The time has come for America to stand up and bring a new day to where we don't have to explain to our children what to do when the police stop. It's time to bring a new day where we don't have to videotape when we see a badge, but where we know that they're there to serve and protect, not treat us like we've been convicted. The time has come for police to understand they're not above the law. They're to enforce the law. And if you can't live up to the badge, don't take the oath and put it on. When we put that badge on you, we expect you to act like somebody that is civilized and respectful. Some say, Reverend Al, police are human. Well, we knew that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have sent you through training. But we assume when you come through that you were trained. Train people. Don't confuse guns from tasers. Train people. Don't shoot men like Philando with a child in the back seat. Train people. Don't put knees on people's necks for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Train people. Don't shoot 41 times. And I'm a Diallo. Train people. Don't shoot at a young 12-year-old boy named Tamir Rice. You broke your training. Now we're going to send you to the corner. And you get your punishment at the corner of the newest jail that we can find. So as we celebrate this young man's life, 20 years old, not even reaching his mid-20s. His mother and father heartbroken, his siblings heartbroken. But they will be confident, knowing that because of this sacrifice, that is going to change the laws of the land. Children unborn is going to know his name. Governors here, Congress people here, senators here, for you, Dante, because you're the prince that made us all come together. They stopped traffic today, all the way through Minneapolis. Folk couldn't drive nowhere because they had to say hail to the prince. They shouldn't have done what they done. We're going to stop Minneapolis today because a prince is on his way to his rest. And as you rest, there's a resting place. There's a martyr's bench. Take your seat, Dante. Tell George Floyd who you are. Take your seat, Dante. Shake hands with Philip Fernando Castillo. Take your seat. Take your seat next to Oscar Grant, because there's a special place in heaven for those that shed innocent blood, because God will use you to straighten out the world. The world will never be the same because we will stand up for situations like this. We do not in any way condone or incite violence. People keep telling me, Reverend, why don't y'all tell people not to be violent? We always have. But when are you going to tell policemen to stop being violent? The problem is not us talking to our youth. The problem is you talking to your bad cops. Now, all cops are not bad. I saw 10 get on the stand the other day and testify against another policeman. That's why no change is here. When you see the blue wall of silence tumble in a courtroom in Minneapolis, when policemen understand that they are committed to the oath rather than to their colleague, that's when we know a breakthrough is coming. That's when we know we can pass the George Floyd bill, because folk are not going to lie on you no more. And next time you get ready to pull your gun, next time you get ready to bend your knee, put in your mind the picture of the man taking the handcuffs and making Chauvin put his hands behind his back and walk into a penitentiary and learn that you will pay for the crimes you commit. As I talk closer to the family, they said that, well, the real reason they stopped was because his tags had expired. Well, I come to Minnesota to tell you your tags have expired. Your tags of racism has expired. Your tags of police brutality has expired. Your tags of white supremacy has expired. Your tags of looking at us different than everybody else has expired. Your tags have expired. It's time to renew and get some new tags. A tags of righteousness, a tags of fairness, a tags of treating everybody the same way, a tags of no justice, no peace. Lastly, when I come to Minneapolis, 3 days after George Floyd was killed, lynched by me, I went to one of the marches and I saw almost as many whites as blacks. Now your children are doing what you wouldn't do, standing up for justice. We called Martin Luther King III National Action Network called a march in Washington, August 28th, the anniversary of his father's march. People told me, don't call it, it's a pandemic, it's going to be a super spreader. But 204,000 people came. We tested them all, we did all we were supposed to do to see what way we could avoid any breaking out of COVID coming in, and we marched around the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. We marched around the John Lewis Voting Act because they're trying to turn back voting rights. Those tags done expired too. That ain't gonna happen no more. And we marched all over. Marched for Breonna Taylor, whose boyfriend is here with us today. Some went and stayed down there and stood up for Breonna. Getting ready to go march for Pamela Turner, May 13th in Texas. I hope y'all live in Texas. We on the way. Because your tags have expired. We're going to stop by North Carolina where a young man was shot yesterday. We're going to look in Columbus, Ohio. Your tags have expired. We're going wherever you show up because your tags have expired. In the name of the prophet Isaiah, we are not going to be quiet as long as there is no justice. I want you to know that this Bible that you claim you believe in, You need to stop quoting it and start reading it. It's a Bible of justice. And if you don't understand it, talk to some of us that read it straight. I know y'all had a president that holds it upside down, but turn it right side up. Because if you turn it right side up and you get to the end of the book, at the end of Revelation, God made a promise, Albert. God made a promise, Katie. He said the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And the lion and the lamb going to lay down together, and God will take care of his children. God will make a way out of no way. God will heal the land. God will take care of Dante now. Stand up and be what we were born to be. We are not anyone's slave. We are the children of God. We're the children of God. We're the children of God. Before we leave, and we're going to leave orderly. We're going to have the family go out first. And y'all that just became family for a day. Katie and Aubrey had to go outside to identify the family. All of y'all became cousins today. We want the family first. But we want some of those that have come to recognize the princely state that we're here and to give proclamations. They ought to be here. Whether you agree with them or not, they should be here to respect who he was and what he stood for. I read he was the center when he played basketball in school. Now he's the center of a movement of God. I want his brothers and sisters to keep your mother and father covered, because it won't be long for these crowds to be gone. Blame those mother could tell you that everybody's here when the cameras are here. But when the cameras go, a lot of your new cousins ain't gonna be there. And y'all gonna have to keep the family together. This police woman is charged. You're gonna have to go through a long trial. And they're gonna try things to not have a trial. But stay by your mother and father. Some of us will be here. And others will come when the cameras come back. I don't worry about the cameras. I got my own TV show. I ain't trying to get on TV. But stay strong and stay together. I saw his auntie on TV. She preached better than any preacher up here. Stand up, auntie. I want us to hear some proclamations and words. Let me start with another one that had been smeared. That God tested and they passed the test. Let us hear from our Congresswoman, Ilhan Omar.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Reverend Sharpton, for being here and for that beautiful eulogy. Most of us in this room, including myself, look at you as a guardian and are blessed to be in your presence. And may Daunte Wright serve as a guardian for all of us. But as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, as one of the youngest and newest members of the Congressional Black Caucus, I also have guardians. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and our chairwoman, Joyce Beatty, serve as guardians for me and many of my colleagues. Joyce Beatty was going to be here and speak on our behalf as the chairwoman of our caucus, but just like we've been visited by tragedy here in Minnesota often, she, in Columbus, Ohio, was visited by a tragedy of a young woman whose life was taken by Columbus police. And so I wanted to read a little bit of the resolution of congressional condolences that our guardian, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, filed on behalf of our son, Daunte Wright, here in Minnesota. Whereas Daunte Demetrius Wright attended Thomas Edison High School in Minneapolis, which I'm an alum of, and Blaine High School in Blaine, Minnesota. After high school, he studied at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities in Minneapolis. Daunte Demetrius Wright had a son born in July 2019. Daunte Demetrius Wright named his son Daunte Demetrius Wright Jr. And we are today comforted by the words of our Lord in the Revelation 21-4, which says, "And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things that passed away." No words can really help ease the pain, no words can really help to ease the loss you bear. Just know that your family and friends are very close in every thought and prayer. May the outpouring of sympathy, the kinds of acts of friends and strangers, the comfort in knowing that your loss is felt by many, help you through this. Daunte Demetrius Wright brought great joy to his family, and his life was a blessing to all who had the privilege to know him. Daunte Demetrius Wright is survived and cherished by his father, Aubrey Wright, and his mother, Katie Wright, and his son, Daunte Wright Jr., and a host of family and friends. And his legacy will live. We also wanted to present this to his mom and dad, if you all can come. We flew a flag over the United States Capitol on behalf of your son. I wanted to present the flag to you.
Take it that way. That way.
Just stay here a minute. We got something else to present them. All of this they deserve. When George Floyd was killed and we wanted the best prosecution, my mentor, Reverend Jesse Jackson, and I called the governor. And the governor talked to the DA, who graciously stepped back and allowed the Attorney General to be the prosecutor that did such a great job. And the governor's here with us today for the proclamation from the state.
As Governor of Minnesota, on behalf of the entire state and our population, we extend our deepest condolences to the Wright family and issue the following proclamation to honor the life and memory of Daunte Wright. Whereas Daunte Wright was beloved by his family, neighbors, community, and had his entire young life ahead of him, we mourn that loss. We know that this tragedy is connected to the deep and systemic racism in our society that Black people in Minnesota and across this country face every single day. While nothing will bring Daunte Wright back to his loved ones, we must continue to enact real, meaningful change at the local, state, and national levels to fight systemic racism so that every single person in Minnesota, Black, Indigenous, brown, and white, can be safe and thrive. We must be steadfast in our accountability to change from the top to the bottom and not rest until we create a different future for Daunte Wright's son and every other child like him. Now therefore, I, Tim Walz, Governor of Minnesota, had ordered a moment of silence for 2 minutes across the entire state of Minnesota at 12 p.m. on Thursday, April 22nd, to honor the life and memory of Daunte Wright and his family and friends as they lay him to rest, and remember that every person whose life has been cut short due to systemic and racism and discrimination will not be forgotten.
In order to pass the George Floyd bill that has already passed the House, we need to pass it in the Senate. We have an advocate from the Senate, your senator in Minnesota, Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you so much, Reverend Al, and thank you, Bishop Powell, for allowing me to join you in this sacred space. Thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Wright, and asking me to close out by saying a few words in your son's memory. I don't have a proclamation for you to give in a piece of paper. I've got a proclamation in the Senate, and that is that we must pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. There's a photo of your son, of Dante, that many Americans have seen by now. He's standing outdoors on a sparkling day, holding his son, Dante Jr., and he's got this big smile on his face, that smile that you said, Katie, would light up the room. We see the lively, outgoing young man who always made people laugh, who was lovingly voted class clown his freshman year by his high school class. We see the basketball fan whose left-handed shot would make any coach proud. Most of all, we see Dante's radiant love for his family as he holds his baby boy. In the photo, Dante Jr. wears a colorful bib with polka dots and a bow tie, and the words "First Birthday" printed in cheerful letters across the front. And that's when we see the enormous hole Dante leaves in the world. That's when we remember that he won't be there for his son's second birthday or high school graduation, or to see those grandkids. Racism in this country is not isolated, it is systemic. And so, When we ask ourselves why Dante Jr. has to grow up without a dad, when we think about what could possibly fill this hole Dante left in the world, we come up empty. Instead, we find a much bigger hole where justice should be. That word is so heavy on our minds this week, justice. 2 days ago, in a courtroom not 10 miles from where Dante was shot, a jury found Derek Chauvin guilty of the murder of George Floyd, and the nation owes a debt of gratitude to the Floyd family. Thank you for being here. To my friend, Attorney General Keith Ellison, who's, by the way, Reverend Al, if I could introduce his family, Keith's family, who has had his back right there, if they could stand up. Keith's family, his wife Monica, they had his back through everything. To Ben Crump, Reverend Al, Reverend Jesse Jackson, all those in my state who have been warriors for justice. And yet, while this was a historic moment for our country, we cannot confuse accountability for justice. Because true justice is not done as long as having expired tags means losing your life during a traffic stop. True justice is not done as long as a chokehold, a knee on the neck, or a no-knock warrant is considered legitimate policing. True justice is not done as long as Black Americans are killed by law enforcement at more than twice the rate of white Americans. And to use your words, Katie, true justice is not done as long as your son isn't coming home for dinner. Our hearts ache for Dante in part because so many people in this room and throughout our state can imagine being 20 years old, driving around their neighborhood on a Sunday afternoon, yes, even with expired registration tags, yes, even with an air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. Many young people can imagine calling their mom when they need insurance information, or when they're scared. But only some can imagine being shot by a police officer during a traffic stop. Only some could imagine that this phone call would be their last. Only some live with that fear every single day. And that, Mr. Crump, as you know, is the definition of injustice. During that groundbreaking trial, George Floyd's family members, a store clerk, a firefighter, passersby, as well as you noted, Reverend Al, a number of police officers testified about George Floyd and what happened that day. They told the truth. They said it was wrong. And we heard Darnella Fraser, a teenager who testified having witnessed George Floyd murder, say, "It's been nights I stay up, apologizing for George Floyd for not doing more." Could she have done more? No. It was not on her to change what happened that fateful day. And it's not on people who nearly a year later happened to be at the intersection of 63rd and Orchard in Brooklyn Center to change what happened to Dante. It is on us as leaders in our communities, in our neighborhoods, as lawmakers. We can do more, we must do more, because for too long change has come inch by inch when we should be miles ahead. It is time for Washington, D.C. to move forward on police reform and pass the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. We must make policing more accountable. We have to change police training and standards, including banning chokeholds, which my colleague, Senator Smith, is leading the bill to ban chokeholds. Along with myself, she is up here with me on this stage. We have to change the status quo so that driving while black doesn't result in getting shot. This is the urgent task before us, not for tomorrow, when I go back to Washington, not for tomorrow, not for next year, but for now. True justice. So as we remember Dante's life and grieve his death, we must repair what's broken in this country and make sure class clowns and basketball fans, doting fathers and caring sons remain with us in body, as Dante now does in spirit. Mrs. Wright, and we won't rest until justice, true justice, is done. That's my proclamation.
We are getting ready to go. Let me again thank our warrior, the Attorney General of Black America, Ben Crump. Give him a lot of love.